The seat beside me stayed empty through 4 costume changes, and my 6-year-old checked it after every single one. Thursday night, the first week of August. A middle school auditorium that smelled like hairspray and floor wax, 90 parents fanning themselves with folded programs, and my daughter Grace up on that stage in a silver leotard, scanning row F for a father who had left that morning with a garment bag over his shoulder and a smile he didn't bother making look sorry. "Client weekend, yo," he'd said, kissing the top of my head the way you'd pat a well-behaved dog. "One of us has a career. You file other people's paperwork. You can film the twirling. I file other people's paperwork." Hold on to that sentence. It's going to matter more than anything else he ever said to me. Grace found me in the crowd at the end of her second number. She waved with her whole arm, the way kids do before the world teaches them to be cool about love. I waved back with both of mine. The empty seat sat between me and a grandmother holding carnations, and I had draped my cardigan over it so it would look claimed instead of abandoned. At 7:52, my phone lit up in my lap. A number I didn't know. A long message, typed with care, punctuation, and everything. "Your husband and I have 2 children together. He chose me. He chose us. It's time you accepted that. Sign the divorce papers like a good little housewife and this stays civilized." The stage lights changed from blue to gold. Somewhere behind me, a toddler asked for fruit snacks. I read the message twice, and I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because it wasn't what she wanted me to feel. My hands didn't shake. My throat didn't close. Something in my chest went very quiet and very level, like a scale finally settling after months of trembling. "Good little housewife." I typed one line back. 1. "Before you send another text, ask him whose name is on the deed of the house you 2 sleep in." Then I screenshotted the whole thread, emailed it to a folder labeled Fernway that this woman did not know existed, checked my watch, and put the phone face down on my knee. On stage, my daughter rose onto her toes with her arms in a circle above her head, and I clapped until my palms stung, because the woman behind that unknown number had just made the mistake I had spent 5 months waiting for someone to make. Let me say this plainly, so you don't mistake my stillness for weakness. I hadn't stayed quiet all summer because I was afraid of him. I'd stayed quiet because a report about a certain signature wasn't finished yet, and because the girl in the silver leotard still believed her daddy hung the moon. You don't take a wrecking ball to a little girl's sky until you've built her somewhere safe to stand. And here is what nobody in that text thread understood yet. In 12 days, my husband planned to sell a house that had never for 1 hour of its existence belonged to him. He needed all 12. I needed 10. The applause rose. Grace bowed, holding hands with a line of glitter-drenched first graders, and my phone started buzzing against my knee over and over, like something small trapped under glass. I didn't turn it over. I went and found my daughter and carried her flowers to the car, and let whoever was calling learn what waiting felt like. If we're going to spend the next 12 days together, you should know who's talking to you. My name is Yolanda. I'm 31. I process title paperwork for a living. And this is the story of why boring women with filing habits are the most dangerous people in any room. If you've ever been called just a housewife by someone who was spending your money while he said it, tell me in the comments. And stay close, because every single dollar of this story comes with a receipt. The buzzing caught up with me at 11:40 that night, after Grace was asleep with her medal still around her neck. Same unknown number, calling now, not texting. I stood in my kitchen, and that word is doing legal work, I promise, and I answered on the 4th ring and said nothing at all. Crying, not delicate crying, the kind that comes with hiccups. "I looked it up," she said. "The county website, the auditor's page, the house, this house. It says the owner is. It's your name. It's been your name since 2021. A wet, ragged breath. "He told me he bought it for me. He told me—" She stopped herself, and then her voice dropped into the question she'd actually called to ask. The question I could tell had been eating her alive for the last 4 hours. "What else is in your name?" I looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. Ponytail, dish towel over one shoulder, the most dangerous woman this family had ever met. "Make him show you the deed," I said. "Then start asking him what else he's shown you that was never his." I hung up. I'm not going to pretend that didn't feel good, because this story is going to ask you to believe me later when I tell you what didn't. She would get her answer, the whole answer. But she'd get it in pieces, on a schedule, because as of 7:52 that evening, the schedule belonged to me. The first piece was already sitting in a post office box across town, in a manila envelope with a county recorder's stamp on it, underneath 4 other envelopes exactly like it. That envelope. Everything in this story runs downhill from that envelope, so let me take you back to where it started. An ordinary Tuesday in March, a title search that wasn't even mine, and the moment I found out what my husband had done to my dead father's house. But for you to understand what was in the envelope, you have to understand the house. The house on Fernway Street has a red front door. My father painted the summer I turned 9, Walter Andrews. No relation to the Andrews I married. Life is strange like that. And Derek loved to joke that I didn't even have to change the monogram towels. My dad drove a forklift for 26 years, paid off that house 6 months before the diagnosis, and died in February of 2019, holding my hand in the bedroom where Grace sleeps now. The will was 1 page, the house to me, his fountain pen to me. "Sign the big things with it," he told me near the end, "so you'll feel me looking over your shoulder." I have signed every real document of my life with that pen since. Remember the pen. Like the paperwork line, it's going to matter. I met Derek in 2017 at an insurance continuing education seminar where I was running the sign-in table. He was the kind of handsome that apologizes for itself, and he could sell anything, including the idea of himself. What I didn't fully understand until later, in 2018, the first agency he built had collapsed with a $210,000 judgment against him. When we married in the fall of 2019, 8 months after I buried my father, Derek explained finances to me the way you'd explain weather to a child. "We keep the big things in your name, babe, just till the judgment age is off. Creditors can't touch what isn't mine." It sounded almost romantic the way he said it. Trust as a tax strategy. So the cars went in my name. The credit lines went in my name. In the spring of 2021, he came home glowing about an investment opportunity. A little rental house on Larkspur Court, 40 minutes east. "It'll be in your name, obviously. Tenants already lined up. Property manager handles everything. You won't have to think about it once." I was newly back at work, pumping milk for Grace in a supply closet at lunch, exhausted down to my bones. I closed on the Larkspur house between a payroll run and a pediatrician appointment. A small mortgage in my name, auto-paid, he promised, out of the account he handled. I signed with my father's pen, my signature, my name, his plan. You want to judge me right now. Some of you are already typing it. How does a title professional not look at her own portfolio? And I'll take that mostly, but hear the whole shape of it. Grief makes you grateful for anyone who says, "I'll handle it." He wasn't cruel then, or he was cruel in vitamins, small doses, easy to mistake for teasing. The paperwork jokes, the one of us has a career. The way he introduced me at his industry dinners, "My better half, she keeps the home fires burning." I stayed for Grace's sake, and for a quieter reason I'm not proud of. I had promised a dying man that his house would hold a family. I confused holding a family with holding my tongue. For 7 years, being married to Derek meant being a load-bearing wall. Nobody notices you until you're gone, and then the whole roof remembers your name. And then came the second Tuesday of March 2026, when a refinance file for a customer on Larkspur Court crossed my desk at work, 3 doors down from the investment house. I hadn't thought about in years. I was mapping the neighboring parcels, the way we always do. I typed the address of my own rental into the county system, idly, the way you'd glance at a shop window you were passing anyway. And there it was, attached to my dead father's house on Fernway Street. Not the rental, the red door, Grace's bedroom, the house Derek had never paid $1 toward, a home equity line of credit. Opened September 2023. Credit limit, $350,000. Secured by my house. Signed in blue ballpoint by a woman named Yolanda Andrews. I have signed everything that matters since 2019 with my father's fountain pen. I have never once signed my name in blue ballpoint. And on the 12th of September, 2023, the date sworn on that signature page, the date a notary I'd never heard of claimed, I stood in front of her. I can tell you exactly where I was, because it was the day of Grace's tonsil surgery. And I sat in a pediatric recovery ward from 6 in the morning until 9 at night, holding a paper cup of apple juice with a bendy straw. I didn't scream. I didn't call him. I sat at my desk in the records department with my employee badge around my neck, and I did what I do. I pulled the whole chain, and I started counting. Here is what pulling the chain means when it's your job. Every recorded document on a property, every deed, every mortgage, every release, sits in the county recorder's index, public, stamped, time-ordered, waiting for anyone patient enough to read an order. Most people never look. Most people trust the person across the dinner table more than they trust an index. I stopped being most people on a Tuesday in March. That first week, I did 4 things, and I did them quietly. I ordered certified copies of everything recorded against Fernway and Larkspur, certified, because a certified copy is the difference between she claims and the county attests. I opened a post office box on the other side of town and rerouted my copies there. I opened a new email address and that folder called Fernway. And on Friday, on my lunch break, in my parked car with the engine off, I called the office of a family attorney named Dana Merrick, who listens the way surgeons cut, and said a sentence I had never said out loud before. I think my husband forged my name, and I need to know everything before he knows I know anything. Then don't confront him, Dana said. Women lose these cases in the first week, at the kitchen table, for free. You're going to feel like silence is lying. It isn't. Silence is evidence protecting itself. So I went home and kissed my husband hello. He asked what was for dinner. I said chicken. You want to know what cold revenge actually feels like? It feels like chicken, seasoned normally, served on time for 160 days. The certified copies came to the post office box in brown envelopes, one property at a time, and each envelope made the picture worse in a new direction. But the recorder's index only gives you the lien and the limit. It does not give you the bleeding. The draws I got the boring way. I was the borrower of record, so I called the bank like any borrower, answered their identity questions with my own life, and asked for statements on an account I had never opened. That HELOC on my father's house wasn't sitting unused. It had a draw history like a heartbeat, steady pulls, 4,000 here, 9,000 there, month after month since 2023. By March of this year, $180,000 of it was gone. Gone where? Not into our checking account. I've balanced that account since 2019. Not into Grace's college fund, which held the same anemic $1,100 it had held for 3 years, while Derek explained that, the market's wrong right now, babe. The answer to gone where was parked 40 minutes east on Larkspur Court. I drove out there on the last Saturday of March. I told Derek I was taking Grace to the Children's Museum, and I did take her, after. Larkspur Court is a cul-de-sac of small brick houses with big maples, the kind of street where trikes migrate between driveways. I parked 4 houses down, between a boat trailer and a mail truck, and I looked at my investment property for the first time in 5 years. There was a tricycle in the yard. There was a plastic slide, faded pink at the top. There was a porch swing with 2 cushions shaped like ladybugs, and there was a black SUV in the driveway with a dent in the rear bumper that I recognized, because I had personally taken that SUV in for the estimate, the SUV that was registered, financed, and insured in the name of Yolanda Andrews, because creditors, babe. And there was a woman in the doorway, younger than me, hair in the kind of effortless knot that takes effort, in leggings and one of Derek's college sweatshirts, the gray one I'd washed 1,000 times, the one that had gone missing at the gym in 2021. She was laughing into her phone, and she absent-mindedly picked a toddler up off the porch step with one arm, and behind her, taped to the storm door at kid height, was a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands under a fat yellow sun. 4, too big, too small. I sat in my car, and I watched my husband's other life breathe for 6 minutes. No filter between me and it. My chest didn't burn, it went Arctic. That level, quiet, settling feeling again, the scale finding true. A boy came around the side yard, chasing a soccer ball. 4, maybe 5 years old. He had Derek's cowlick. He had my daughter's chin. That's the sentence I still can't say out loud without my jaw going tight, so I'll type it once and we'll move on together. That little boy is Grace's brother, and she learned his name after I did. Grace's booster seat squeaked behind me. "Mama, is this the museum?" "Wrong street, baby," I said, and pulled out slow and legal, hands at 10 and 2. Mama read the map wrong. I don't read maps wrong. By Monday, I had ordered the records that public offices will give any patient woman with correct forms, the Larkspur Utility Billing History. In my name, auto-paid from an account Derek controlled. The auto loan statements, my name, and a lease. Derek had actually manufactured a lease for the tenant back in 2021, a lease I was never shown, with rent listed at $1,500 a month. Per the file, per 5 years of bank records, not $1 of rent had ever been paid. The tenant's name on that fiction of a lease was Cassidy Van. She wasn't a tenant. She was the reason my name had become a warehouse. April was the month of the pen. Dana Merrick's first question, when I brought her the certified copies, was the right one. Can you prove the HELOC signature isn't yours? Prove it to a jury who's never met you? Because here's the ugly truth about forgery. Your word means little when the other signatures on the account are genuinely yours. Derek was smart. Everything he could get me to sign legitimately, he had. The forged line ran through the middle of 100 true ones camouflaged. But handwriting doesn't lie to people trained to read it, and neither do hospitals. We hired a forensic document examiner named Leland Ross, a soft-spoken man with a jeweler's loop, 8 months shy of retirement, who had testified in over 200 cases. I gave him 30 exemplars of my real signature, the fountain pen line, heavy on the downstroke, my father's ghost in every Y. The HELOC page was blue ballpoint, wrong slant, wrong pressure, a careful copy of a signature I stopped using in 2019. And I gave Dana the pediatric hospital's records for September 12, 2023. Admitted 6:04 a.m., discharged 8:51 p.m., parent signature, mine, the real one, on surgical consent at 7:15 a.m., initialed hourly on the recovery log all day. A notary swears you stood in front of her. I could prove I was holding apple juice in a recovery ward 17 miles away for 15 hours. "How long for a full report?" I asked Leland. "Done right? Weeks, not days. I don't do drafts, ma'am. My conclusions get people indicted." "Take the weeks," I said. "I'll spend them listening." Ohio is a one-party consent state. That means I can lawfully record any conversation I am part of. So from April on, the phone in my apron pocket earned its keep. I didn't bait him. Dana was firm about that. And honestly, why bother? Contempt this practice doesn't need bait. I just stopped changing the subject and let him talk. Sunday dinners where he graded my cooking against his mother's. The night he looked at my work lanyard on the counter and said, "Cute that they badge you people like anyone stealing files." The morning of our anniversary, when he took a call in the driveway with his back to the kitchen window and said, low and warm, a sentence I wrote on the back of a grocery receipt the second he came inside and have never once needed to reread. Because she signs whatever I put in front of her, that's why. one more year, and we're clean. She signs whatever I put in front of her. Every recording went to the Fernway folder, dated, backed up twice. I cried exactly once that spring, not at any of that, but in May, at the post office, holding the certified deed for a condominium unit on the north side that I had apparently owned since 2022, the Waverly, Unit 4C. I remembered signing investment paperwork that year, at our kitchen table, nursing a sinus infection, Derek's hand warm on my shoulder, tabs marking every line. The condo's utilities were auto-paid from Derek's account. Its occupant, per the building's own newsletter, congratulating her on winning the lobby bake-off 2 springs running, was Dolores Andrews, my mother-in-law, the woman who called me the help that stayed at her own Christmas table and let everyone laugh it off as wine. Her son had installed her in a condo I owned, and I genuinely believe she never asked whose name made her comfort possible, because knowing would have obligated her to something. Some people keep their conscience the way they keep a guest room, technically available, never used. So by June, the map of my marriage looked like this. A house on Larkspur I owned, sheltering my husband's second family. An SUV I owed, parked in her driveway. A condo I owned, housing his mother. A $350,000 line of credit against my dead father's roof, forged in my name, bleeding out at a rate that had begun, that spring, to accelerate. 11,000 in April, 14 in May. Something was coming that needed cash. I didn't know yet what he was feeding. I found out on the 9th of June, at my daughter's 6th birthday party, and this is the part of the story I'd skip if I were kinder to myself. Backyard party, 19 kids, a unicorn piñata, my $300 of careful joy. Grace wore her silver leotard because 6-year-olds understand formal wear better than we do. Derek was there for 40 minutes, long enough to be photographed flipping burgers, and then his phone buzzed and he became a weather system leaving. Client emergency, yo. He kissed Grace's hair, and on his way out, in front of my neighbor, he picked up the sheet cake, the untouched second sheet cake, the one we hadn't cut, and said, "The office will demolish this. You people already had plenty." Grace ran her paper plate of piñata candy to me and asked, "Did Daddy take his present?" She had wrapped him a present for her own birthday. A macaroni frame with her school picture, wrapped in Christmas paper, because that's what was in the craft drawer, labeled Daddy in backwards letters. It was the 3rd gift she'd made him that year. The Father's Day mug was still in her closet, wrapped. The Valentine card was still in her closet, wrapped. She kept them on a shelf she could reach, for when Daddy has time. I drove past Larkspur Court that night with the recorder off and my headlights off, which I don't recommend and won't apologize for. Through the front window, in warm lamplight, my husband stood in a kitchen that my name kept dry, feeding birthday cake, her birthday cake, to a little boy on his shoulders, while Cassidy laughed and speared a bite for the toddler. A family eating my daughter's cake in my house on the night my daughter fell asleep, holding a wrapped gift with his name on it. I sat in the dark until the lamp went out. Then I drove home, and I stood in Grace's doorway listening to her breathe, and I made the decision that the rest of this story obeys. No more collecting this past, time to schedule the future. In the morning I called Dana Merrick and said, "When Leland's report is final, I want everything ready to file within 72 hours. Divorce, the fraud claims, all of it. We move on my calendar, not his. And until then, I said, I'm going to be the best little housewife he's ever seen." July taught me what the money was feeding. The HELOC draws jumped again, 19,000 in one pull, the biggest yet. And the same week, a heavy cream envelope arrived at the Fernway house, addressed to us both, the paper so thick it stood up on its own. An invitation. Andrews Risk Partners invites you to the launch of our new home. My husband had leased and furnished a glass-front office suite downtown, hired a signage company, hired a caterer. There was a photo of him on the invitation, arms crossed, in front of a logo with his name on it. Our name. My name technically wearing his font. I put the invitation on the refrigerator with a magnet, dead center, where he'd see me seeing it. Wifely pride. He straightened it. "Biggest month of my life coming, yo," he said. "Try not to embarrass me at the party." He had no idea how hard I was already trying, because by then I understood the shape of the thing. A man doesn't hemorrhage borrowed cash into an office lease, a launch party, and a second family's remodel unless he believes a wave of money is about to land. And on the 5th of August, a Wednesday, one day before the recital, and I want you to appreciate how casually catastrophe files itself, the wave showed up at my job. New purchase order in our office system. Routine. Dozens open every day, except this one had a property address on Larkspur Court, and a seller named Yolanda Andrews, and a buyer named Tori Van. Closing date, August 18th, 13 days out. I sat very still at my desk with my badge around my neck. Cute that they badge you people, and read my own name selling my own house without me. Tori Van. I didn't need 3 guesses at the surname. Cassidy's cousin, it turned out, 24 years old, a nail tech, suddenly buying a house with a purchase price $40,000 under any honest number for that street. A straw buyer, the oldest laundering trick in real estate. Sell the asset to friendly hands, cheap and fast, before a creditor or a wife can reach it. The proceeds would land wherever Derek pointed, and the seller's signature at that closing table would be blue ballpoint, wrong slant, wrong pressure, his second forgery of my name, this time in front of my own industry, in a transaction my own company would insure. Here's what stood between him and that, nothing he knew about. I did not flag the file. I did not tell my manager. I went to the restroom, locked the stall, and called Dana Merrick with my heart finally beating fast. Not fear, ignition. "He set the closing for the 18th, I said. "Leland's report? He says he can certify by the 15th, 16th if the bank drags its feet on the signature card." I did the math I'd been doing all summer, one last time. 13 days, I said. "Tell Leland I only need 11. Then it was Thursday, and you already know Thursday. The empty seat, the silver leotard, her text, my one line back, and at 11:40 that night, a crying voice asking the question that was going to spend the rest of August getting answered. What else is in your name? What I didn't tell you yet is what the text did inside his house. Both his houses. Friday evening, Derek came home from his client weekend a day early with flowers. Grocery store flowers, the ones by the register. I watched my husband of 7 years walk in wearing his best insurance face, and I got to see, live, a man discover that his 2 worlds had brushed wires. "Some woman texted you," he said, sympathetic, disgusted, casual, all 3 at once. "Babe, it's a scam. They scrape numbers. They say your husband, half the county got that text." He set the flowers down. "And listen, if you went poking at the county website after, I know how you get. There's a clerical mess on a couple of the investment titles. I've got the lawyer untangling it. Don't dig around, okay? You'll just make his billable hours worse. I know how you get. Sir, you have no idea how I get." And this is the moment I'd been rehearsing since March, so I gave it everything. I let my eyes fill. Onions at lunch, if you're asking. And I said, quiet, tired, beaten, "Derek, I'm not stupid. If there's somebody, just say so. I won't even fight you. I just want this over gently for grace. Whatever's fair, I'll sign." I watched relief move through his shoulders like a front coming through. He crossed the kitchen and held my face in both hands, tender as a man petting his own alibi. "There's nobody, yo. But since you brought it up, maybe we have grown apart. Let's do it clean. No lawyers bleeding us. Rick can draw up something simple. You could sign Friday, and we stay friends." Rick was his golf partner with a law degree. Something simple. 11 days before a closing that required my signature, or a felony pretending to be it. He needed me signed away, or docile, before the 18th. Both was better. Friday, I agreed, and my voice did not shake, because scales don't shake once they've settled. After your party, I don't want to spoil the party. He kissed my forehead. He took the SUV, my SUV, to her house to tell her the wife was handled. And I stood at the sink washing a single pan for 11 minutes and let him drive my evidence right back to my address. The party, Saturday night, deserves its own chapter in the Museum of Things I Survived Politely. Glass front suite, downtown. 80 people. A jazz trio, bacon-wrapped dates, a step-and-repeat banner with his logo on it, and me in the navy dress he'd once called very appropriate, circulating with the specific serenity of a woman who knows what a draw history looks like. He gave a speech. Of course he gave a speech. He stood under his own name in brushed metal letters and told 80 people, "Everything you see, I built from nothing. Nobody handed me a thing." And 80 people raised glasses that my dead father's roof had paid to fill. I clapped. There's video of me clapping. I want there to be video of me clapping. His mother found me by the shrimp. Dolores, in ecclesiastical purple, lipstick applied like a verdict, 3 Chardonnays deep. She put her hand on my wrist. She'd never once touched me warmly, this was positioning, and delivered what she must have workshopped in the car. "Derek tells me you two are being adults about things. I'll say this once, dear, as family. A woman who walks away gracefully keeps her dignity. A woman who grabs..." She squeezed my wrist, tiny, meaningful, loses everything, and everyone watches it happen. Walk away with nothing. It reads better. You were always... And I promise you this is verbatim, because my apron pocket had long since become a courtroom. The help that stayed. Don't leave like the help that stole. The help that stayed. In a condo I own, madam, bake-off and all. "You're right, Dolores," I said, warm as soup. "Everyone should end up holding exactly what belongs to them. That's all I want out of this. I want everyone holding what's theirs. I'm signing Friday." She toasted me. To this day, that's the detail people don't believe. She raised her glass, and mine had gone somewhere else to be. So she clinked the air beside my hand and told me I was finally showing some class. I said I needed the ladies' room. What happened instead? On my way down the back hall, past the catering staging and the boxed letterhead, $300 a case, I'd seen the draw. I passed my husband in the alcove by the emergency exit with his phone to his ear, shoulders wrong, party laugh nowhere on him. I slowed exactly enough. One-party consent doesn't apply to other people's calls, so the recorder stayed in my pocket. My ears are not a regulated device. "No, I get that it's routine, but why now?" A pause. His hand went to the back of his neck, a thing it does when underwriting goes sideways. "It's my wife's line. Yes, I manage. She authorizes. Look, we're refinancing everything next month anyway. Can we not? Fine, Monday." He stood there a second after the call died, under the exit sign, in the glow of the launch party his forgeries had paid for. Then he rebuilt his face muscle by muscle. I watched a man assemble sincerity like flat-pack furniture and walked back toward the jazz. I didn't see me. They never see the help. What he'd just heard, though he didn't know its name yet, was the sound of a fuse. Leland Ross doesn't do drafts, but he does do verification, and a forensic examiner, authenticating a signature card, sends a records request through a bank's compliance department. And compliance departments make routine little phone calls, and routine little phone calls arrive during jazz trios 13 days before a man's fraudulent closing, asking him to come in Monday about his wife's line of credit. 12 days on his calendar, 10 on mine. And from that Saturday night forward, you and I both knew something Derek Andrews did not. Every hour he kept building was demolition, invoiced to him, scheduled by me. I gave a second toast at 10 o'clock, to family. I raised my water and let him drink to what was coming. Monday morning he ironed a shirt himself, which he had not done since our wedding week. "Compliance meeting," he said, checking his teeth in the toaster. "Some clerk flagged a routine review on the equity line. I'll charm it dead by 10. I handed him his coffee and the travel mug. "Bring them donuts," I said. People are nicer to men who bring donuts. He laughed and told me that was the smartest thing I'd said all year. He came home at 11:40 with the shirt untucked and his shoulders back down where they belonged, and I knew before he opened his mouth that a very polite woman in a very small room had told him exactly what she was allowed to tell him, which was nothing. "Handled," he announced to the kitchen. "Total non-event. They just want documentation on the original file." He dropped his keys in the dish, and then he leaned on the counter and studied me with a new expression, the one men wear when they've decided to be generous. "Yo, after Friday, after we sign, you should think about leaving that job." I kept peeling the carrot. "Why's that?" "Because it's going to be awkward. Divorce gets around an industry like that. You'll be the sad file clerk everybody whispers about." He said it kindly. "That's the part I need you to hear." He said it the way you'd suggest a woman get her hair out of her eyes. "Take a break. Be with Grace. Let me be the one with the career." I put the carrot down. On the refrigerator, dead center under a magnet shaped like a peach, his launch invitation still hung where I'd pinned it. 11 days of it looking at me. I straightened the corner with one finger, the way you'd square a document before you file it. "Rick's sending the papers tonight," he added on his way out. "Simple stuff. Don't overthink it, babe. You've never had a head for paperwork." My phone buzzed against the counter as the door closed. Dana Merrick, 6 words. Ohio makes notaries hand it over. She'd mailed the letter that morning. In this state, a notary has to keep a journal of what she stamps, and she has to produce a copy of an entry to anyone who asks for it in writing. You don't need a lawsuit. You don't need a judge. You need a stamp, an address, and the patience to wait for a woman to open her mail. The papers landed at 9:12 that night, while Derek watched a golf highlight reel with his sock feet on my father's coffee table. I read them on my laptop at the kitchen table with a mug of tea going cold beside me. 22 pages of what he had called simple. The first 8 were exactly what a golf partner with a law degree produces when a man tells him, "Make it look fair." Shared custody boilerplate, a spousal support waiver, a line about each party retaining personal effects. Page 9 was not boilerplate. Page 9 was a quitclaim deed, under a heading that read, "Administrative Correction of Title," in the flat gray language of a form nobody reads at the end of a long document. I, Yolanda Andrews, grantor, conveyed to Derek Andrews, grantee, all interest in 3 properties: the Fernway House, the Larkspur House, the Waverly, Unit 4C, 3 legal descriptions, meets and bounds, all correct. Someone had pulled them from the county index. Someone with an office manager and a scanner. At the bottom, a notary block, blank, waiting. I want to tell you my hands shook. They didn't. I have handled thousands of deeds. I know exactly what a deed feels like when it's about to steal something, because it feels like every other deed on earth. That's the whole design. He wasn't asking me to give up a marriage on Friday. He was asking me to hand him my father's roof, in front of a notary, in a stack he'd told me not to overthink. I emailed the file to Dana with one line, page 9. Then I closed the laptop and carried my cold tea to the doorway of the living room, where my husband lay on my father's couch under my father's roof, laughing at a man missing a putt. "Get them signed by Friday," he said without turning around. "Rick's doing us a favor." "He really is," I said. He heard agreement. What he'd actually heard was a woman noting, for the record, that his attorney had just put his own license inside my file. The letter came Tuesday. It came certified, which is how banks say we are done being friendly, and it came to the Fernway House because that is the address on a loan secured by the Fernway House. Derek got to the mailbox first. I was at the sink. Grace was at the kitchen table with a 500-piece puzzle of a barn, sorting edges into a shoebox lid, humming the recital song. He opened it standing up. I watched his eyes go left to right and left to right again, and then his hand found the back of his neck. He called Rick from the middle of my kitchen. He did not go outside. That is how safe he felt in that room. "They can't do that on a draw account. That's not—" No. Rick, the balance is $340,000, and they're suspending the whole line and demanding all of it because some clerk opened a review on the original file. A pause. His voice went up. The 2 interest payments are an excuse. That's all it is. I skipped them because every dollar I had was in the cash to close. Yes, all of it. Another pause, and then the sentence he should have driven somewhere to say, "Look, after the 18th, this is all paper. She signs Friday. It gets fixed on the back end." $340,000. I kept my hands in this dishwater, and I did the arithmetic that a woman who reads draw histories for a living does automatically. In March, that line had bled 180,000. April 11, May 14, June 9, July 19, the office lease, the signage, the bacon-wrapped dates. 233,000, not 340. He hung up and went to the garage, and I dried my hands and pulled the account up on my phone, standing in my own pantry with the door half shut. And there it was, one line, dated the 3rd of August, 15 days before a closing. Draw 107,000. I would like to describe what happened in my chest, but the honest answer is that something in me went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator cycle. A cash buyer needs cash. Tori Van, 24, nail tech, was bringing $105,000 to a closing table to buy a house for $150,000, a house worth $190,000 on the worst day of its life. She was not bringing her money. She was bringing mine, drawn against my dead father's roof, and handing it back to my husband as a purchase price, so that a house I owned would legally become a house I did not own, and the wire that made it possible would be recorded forever against the bedroom where my daughter sleeps. Pay off what was left of the little mortgage on Larkspur, and the rest landed wherever he pointed. I was buying my house from me, with my money, and billing me the interest. That's the sentence I'd write on the wall of every kitchen in America if I could. There is a kind of man who does not steal from you so much as run you like an appliance. Mama? Grace was in the doorway of the pantry, holding a puzzle piece with a barn door on it. She'd heard the whole call, because 6-year-olds are the best surveillance system ever built, and nobody remembers they're in the room. Does Daddy owe money? I crouched down to her level. Here's where a different mother lies, and I don't judge her, but I had promised myself in March that Grace would never learn from me that the world was safer than it is. Grown-ups borrow money sometimes, I said, and then they have to pay it back. She turned the puzzle piece over. She has her grandfather's habit of thinking with her hands. Is that why he goes away? Because he owes money so he has to hide? I did not correct her. I want you to remember that I did not correct her, because in 6 days that sentence is going to come back and take my legs out from under me, and I'll have nobody to blame, but the woman crouched on a pantry floor, deciding that silence was kinder than the truth. Come finish your barn, I said. Wednesday, Cassidy Van found me in a grocery store parking lot. She had printed the auditor's page at a library, driven to the address on it, and waited 2 houses down from my father's red door until I pulled out. She followed me 4 miles before she found the nerve to get out of her car. She was standing at my driver's door, with the printout folded in her fist, younger than the porch had made her look, tired in the specific way of a woman with a 2-year-old, and a lie she has just started counting. You could have just told me, she said. You texted me first, I said. You told me to sign like a good little housewife. Her chin went. She unfolded the paper, the county auditor's page for Larkspur Court, printed at a library, my name in the owner field, highlighted in yellow like homework. He says it's a technicality. He says the deed's in your name because of a lawsuit from before, and he's transferring it to me next week after the sale. He says the buyer's a friend who's... She stopped, because she was listening to herself. I did not save her. Understand me. That woman had spent 5 years in a house I paid for, and had put her children in a photograph on a storm door where my daughter's brother learned to walk. But I did not push her under either, and this is the only part of that week I'm actually proud of. One question, I said. Have you signed anything for Tori? A letter. Her voice got small. A gift letter. For the loan people. Saying the money to close was a gift from family and no repayment expected. Whose name is on the donor line? Mine. She looked at me, and I watched a woman find the bottom of a well in real time. He put my name on it. He said the money was yours to give, and that you knew, and that this was just how it gets written up. Cousin to cousin. Perfectly ordinary, right up until you learn the money left a credit line the donor had never heard of. Her phone lit up on the roof of my car between us, face up, one letter on the screen. D. It rang out and started again immediately, the way phones do when a man is used to being answered. "Don't tell him you talked to me," she said, grabbing it. "I won't need to," I said. Thursday, he emptied our daughter's college account. $1,100, the same $1,100 that had sat there for 3 years while the market was wrong, transferred out at 8:04 a.m. into the operating account he thinks I can't see, along with a canceled auto pay. Grace's fall dance registration, $240, terminated the same morning. Closing costs are closing costs. Somebody has to pay them. And then, because a man on a winning streak cannot leave well enough alone, he took the afternoon off, picked up Cassidy and the 2 little ones, and drove them to a park pavilion for family photographs. I know this because he posted them. 14 images, public, at 6:51 p.m., a blonde photographer's watermark in the corner. The location tagged, cheerfully, to Larkspur Court. Him in a white shirt with his arm around her waist, the 4-year-old with his cowlick on his shoulders, the toddler on her hip, and a caption I have read so many times I could recite it at gunpoint. New chapter. Building something real with the people who choose you back. Every one of those pictures is now an exhibit. Residency, dated. Intent, dated. 2 adults and 2 children establishing a household at a property he was selling as vacant. He photographed his own case file and put a filter on it. Grace saw them at her grandmother's. That's the part. Dolores had her Thursday afternoons, and Dolores keeps her tablet on the kitchen counter of a condominium I own, and my 6-year-old picked it up to look for cartoons and found her father in a park with a boy on his shoulders. When I came to get her, Grace was standing in the hallway with her shoes already on, holding her backpack with both arms like a life vest. Dolores followed me out to the car in her house slippers, wine already poured somewhere behind her. "She has to learn to accept things," she said. "Children are resilient. Honestly, Yolanda, this is what happens when a woman lets herself become invisible." I buckled my daughter in. I closed the door gently so she wouldn't hear. "Dolores," I said, "you've been in that condo 4 years. Have you ever once looked at the deed?" She blinked at me over her wine glass, in the parking lot of a building whose lobby bake-off she had won 2 springs running. "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about," she said. "No," I agreed, "you never did. Friday I went to sign." Rick's office is above a bank branch on a street with angled parking, and the conference room smells like carpet glue and ambition. Derek was already there in his party suit. So was Rick, who shook my hand with both of his and said he was so glad we were handling this like adults. And in the corner chair, with an embosser and a stamp pad set out in front of her like a tea service, sat a woman I recognized from the launch party. "You remember Corinne," Derek said. "From my office. She's commissioned, so we don't have to go running around." Corinne Fadley, office manager, notary public, the woman who orders his letterhead at $300 a case. I sat down. I took my father's fountain pen out of my purse and set it on the table beside the stack because I wanted him to see it. Some things you do for the audience of your own dead. "Now," Rick said, "most of this is standard. Walk me through it," I said. Slowly. "I know I'm not good with paperwork." "And gentlemen," he did. "That is the whole trick, if you ever need it. A man who thinks you're stupid will explain his own crime to you at a comfortable pace, in front of witnesses, if you flatter the part of him that enjoys explaining." Rick walked me through custody. Rick walked me through the support waiver. And when we got to page 9, Derek leaned in over the table with the easy warmth of a man closing and said out loud, in a room with a lawyer and a commissioned notary in it, "That one's just cleanup, yo. Those are all my properties. The rental, my mother's place, this house. They only ever went in your name because of the judgment. This puts everything back where it belongs before the sale on the 18th. My properties, before the sale on the 18th. Corinne's stamp pad sat open. Rick nodded along like a man watching himself be paid. I picked up my father's pen. I turned it once between my fingers, the way I have turned it before every real signature of my adult life. Derek slid the stack toward me and uncapped his own pen too, in solidarity, in celebration. I put the cap back on mine. "I'm not going to sign today," I said. "The room did that thing rooms do." Rick started talking about how, of course, we could revisit, no pressure, and Derek's face came apart in stages, the way a building does. "You said Friday." He said it twice. "Yolanda, you said Friday." "I said I didn't want to spoil your party," I said. "I didn't." I stood, and I put the pen away, and at the door I stopped and asked Corinne a question in the flattest, most administrative voice I own, the voice I use on the phone all day with county clerks. "Corinne, do you keep your journal for everything, or just for the online ones?" She looked at me. Her hand had gone still on the embosser. 8 seconds, I counted them, before she said, "Everything is kept properly." "Good," I said. "That's a relief." I drove back to work and filed 4 purchase orders and ate a sandwich at my desk, and at no point did I let myself imagine the phone call she made from the parking garage an hour later, or who she did not call, because imagining was not on the schedule. Saturday, the 9th day, Leland Ross's report came in at 7:15 in the morning, one day ahead of the deadline I'd given him. 26 pages, a jeweler's loop rendered into English. I read it in the driveway in my car so I could read it alone, and I'm going to give you only the 4 sentences that mattered. 1. The questioned signature on the 2023 credit line agreement was not written by the writer of the exemplars. 2. The questioned signature on the 2026 purchase documents was not written by the writer of the exemplars either, but was written by the same hand as the 2023 signature. 3. The same hand also produced the signer's signature line in a notary's journal on the 12th of September, 2023. The line a notary is required by law to watch the signer write in front of her at the desk. 4. In the opinion of the examiner, all 3 questioned signatures were executed by a person practicing the model, with characteristic hesitation at the terminal stroke of the Y. Practicing. Somewhere in my house at some point, my husband had sat down with a page of my name and worked on it. Attached, because Corinne fatally had emailed her answer to Dana's letter at 4:51 on Friday afternoon, 90 minutes after I asked her a question in a conference room, and about 20 after she made a phone call from a parking garage, 2 scans from her notary journal. The entry for the 12th of September, 2023, recorded the signer's identification as an Ohio driver's license and wrote down the document number printed on the card. That document number belongs to a card I surrendered at the deputy registrar's counter in 2018 when they handed me the replacement that has been in my wallet ever since. The same card I used at 6:04 that morning to check my daughter in for a tonsillectomy 17 miles away. Dana called it AITA. "He's done," she said. "Do you want to talk about how gentle you want this?" "He drained our daughter's college account on Thursday," I said, "to pay closing costs on a house he was buying from me with my own equity." There was a pause on the line, and then Dana Merrick said the only unprofessional thing I ever heard her say. "Then let's not be gentle." "Monday," I said. "He'll have 28 days to answer a complaint. I've had 160 to write one." Sunday was the 10th day, and the longest day of my life. I made pancakes. I let Grace do the flipping. At 4 in the afternoon, Derek came home to change and told me, standing in the doorway of my father's bedroom, that he'd talked to Rick, and if I wanted to be difficult, he'd see me in court and I would come out with nothing because I had never earned a real dollar in my life. I said, okay. I took that as a win. On the night of the recital, I told you he had 12 days and I only needed 10. That Sunday night, everything I needed existed. 26 pages in a folder, 2 scans of a notary's handwriting, a hospital's hourly log, a draw history, a folder called Fernway with 160 days in it. 10 days, and the only thing left in the world between my husband and the rest of his life was a clerk's window that opened at 8:30. He slept in my house that night, under my roof, in a bed I own, and he set his alarm for a closing on Tuesday. and I lay in the dark next to him, listening to a man breathe on the last night of his life as he understood it. Monday, the 11th day, 8:31 a.m. Dana filed a complaint for divorce in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, Division of Domestic Relations, and in the General Division, a civil complaint, fraud, conversion, quiet title, and civil liability for a criminal act, with the examiner's report attached as an exhibit. The forgery itself went where forgery goes. A private citizen doesn't get to charge anybody with a felony. A private citizen gets to hand a prosecutor a very good afternoon. I signed the verification page with my father's fountain pen in the hallway outside the clerk's window, standing up, heavy on the downstroke, his ghost in the Y. 9:14 a.m. With a case number in hand, Dana recorded a lis pendens against the Larkspur property. In English, a public notice, stamped into the same county index my husband had mined for his legal descriptions, announcing to every title company, lender, and buyer on earth that this property is the subject of pending litigation. It costs about the same as dinner. It stops a sale like a wall stops a car. 10:05 a.m. I walked the certified copies, the report, and the draw history into the bank's fraud unit myself, badge off, hair down, a customer for once instead of a clerk. They took the file. By 2:00 that afternoon, the line was frozen and flagged, and the past due letter that had been chasing my address stopped being my problem and started being a criminal referral. 12:20 a.m., the county prosecutor's economic crimes unit accepted the package. 1:00 p.m., a process server walked into a glass-front suite downtown, past a brushed metal logo, and handed my husband a stack of paper in front of Corinne Fadley's desk. I wasn't there. I have never once wished I were, and I want to be honest about that. There's no version of me that needed to watch. I needed it to happen. Those are different appetites, and only one of them is any good for you. 3:40 p.m., a notice to quit was posted on the door at Larkspur Court. 60 days, not 3. I want that on the record, too. And at 4:15, a tow operator I hired legally, with the registration, the loan statements, and a lien holder letter in his hand, collected a black SUV with a dent in the rear bumper from that driveway. And the last thing he told me on the phone was that a young woman had come out onto the porch and simply handed him the key. By 6 o'clock, Derek's world was making calls without him. Rick withdrew. Formally by email at 5:52, conflict of interest effective immediately, because a golf partner with a law degree had spent Friday afternoon watching a client describe a quitclaim on 3 properties as cleanup in front of his own notary, and had suddenly understood what room he'd been standing in. Corinne surrendered her journal to the prosecutor's office and her commission to the Secretary of State by the end of the week. She never called me. She did tell an investigator that she had notarized documents at her employer's request on several occasions when the signer wasn't available, and that she'd been told the wife had a habit of signing things and forgetting. And Cassidy Van called me at 7:40 p.m. from a house with a notice taped to the door. "There's a paper on my door," she said. She wasn't crying this time. Crying was Thursday. This was the flat voice that comes after. 60 days. It says 60 days. "That's more than the law makes me give you," I said. "Take it." "He says it's your fault. He's saying I pushed him into the sale." A pause. "He texted me an hour ago. He said, and I'm reading it, 'This is what happens when you get greedy.'" There it was. He'd turned on her before dinner. She asked the question again. The same one from that first night, the one she'd been carrying like a stone in her mouth for 11 days. "What else is in your name?" So I gave her the rest of it, on a schedule, the way you feed someone who hasn't eaten. The house she was standing in, the SUV that had left her driveway 2 hours earlier, and when she was quiet, one more, his mother's condominium on the north side, Unit 4C. She made a small sound. "The Waverly? She brags about the Waverly." "She does," I said. "What do I do?" she said, and it wasn't really a question. "2 things," I said. "Write down every dollar he ever gave you and every place he ever told you he owned. Then call the legal aid number I'm going to text you and file for child support for those 2 kids. Not from me. From him." His name goes on that order, and it stays on it whether he's employed, unemployed, or incarcerated. Why would you help me? I'm not helping you, I said. Those children didn't pick their father, you did. He came home at 9:20 that night, and he was crying, which I had never once seen. He stood in my father's kitchen holding the papers a stranger had put in his hands, and he told me I had destroyed the future of 2 babies who had nothing to do with any of this. He told me the prosecutor doesn't understand small business. He told me he had only ever been trying to build something for all of us, and that I had never, not once, understood the pressure he was under. Then he asked me to call the bank in the morning and tell them I'd authorized it after all. I put a certified copy of the 2023 signature page on the table between us, and next to it, page 9 of Rick's simple paperwork, and next to that, a photograph of my daughter's savings balance at 8:03 a.m. on Thursday and at 8:05. You have 28 days to answer the complaint, I said. You have 1 to think about what you'll say to Grace. He looked at the 3 pieces of paper on the table and said, You can't prove I knew. Derek, I said, you practiced. He left around 10. I locked the door and stood with my forehead against it, and for about 90 seconds, I let myself feel like the smartest woman in Ohio. That's how long it lasted, because at 11:20, I heard a sound from the kitchen I had never heard in my house. A hard crack, then a scatter like hail on a windshield. Grace was on the kitchen floor in her nightgown with her hair stuck to her cheek. The piggy bank, the fat ceramic one with the chipped ear, the one my father bought me the summer he painted the door, the one I'd carried out of his house and set on my daughter's dresser the week she was born, that she fed every allowance Sunday, that she once made me take down to the car so it could see the ocean, was in pieces around her knees. She was on her hands and knees pushing quarters into a shoebox lid. The same lid from the puzzle, edges only. She'd sorted them by size. Baby! I did it on the towel first, she said fast, defensive, wet, so it wouldn't chip the floor. It didn't chip the floor, Mama, I checked. Grace, what are you doing? And my daughter looked up at me from a floor covered in the broken body of the first thing she ever owned and said it in the reasonable voice children use when they have solved a problem for you and are worried you won't be grateful. It's for Daddy. It's $41 and I counted it twice. She pushed the lid toward me across the tile. You said when grown-ups borrow money, they have to pay it back. So if I pay some of it back, then he doesn't owe as much, and then he doesn't have to hide anymore, and he can come to the recital next time. I have been called a lot of things in the last year. Cold, calculating, the help that stayed, a woman with a filing habit. I sat down on my kitchen floor in the ceramic and the quarters, and I made a sound I did not know my body could make, and my 6-year-old put her arms around my neck and told me it was okay, Mama, it's okay, we can fix it. $41 is a lot, $340,000, and she brought me 41, and she was the only person in that entire story who tried to pay anything back. I want to tell you I said something wise. I said, You are the best person I know, about 9 times, into her hair, until she got embarrassed and asked if she could have cereal at midnight, and I said yes. Later, when she was asleep, I swept up the pieces. I kept the chipped ear in my pocket for 11 days. I'm not going to explain that. The 18th of August, the 12th day, their day. I went to work, because that is what you do. On the Monday after the launch party, before any of the rest of it, before Rick's papers, before the letter, I had walked into the office of my manager, Paula Renfro, and disclosed a personal conflict on the Larkspur file in writing. Not the fraud, not one word about the fraud, just the plain, boring, career-saving sentence. The seller of record on this transaction is me. My access was revoked the same afternoon, and the file went to another branch by Wednesday, and I never opened it again. That memo mattered more than anything else I did all summer, and it was the least dramatic thing on the list. So I processed other people's paperwork. Around 10:40, somewhere across town, a title officer I have never met pulled the updated report on a small brick house on Larkspur Court and found a lis pendens recorded at 9:14 the previous morning. Everything after that was procedure, which is another word for gravity. The underwriter declined to insure. Without insurable title, the lender declined to fund. A young woman named Tori Van, who had been told by a cousin's boyfriend that she'd get $4,000 in a favor, sat at a closing table with a folder and watched the entire architecture of her adult year come apart in about 6 minutes. When the closer read the title report out loud, she read the ownership line the way we all read it, flat, procedural, like a train announcement. Owner of record Yolanda Andrews since May of 2021. They tell me, Derek said, "That's my wife," and that nobody in the room said anything at all. At 11 Heaven, Paula closed her office door and sat on the edge of her desk instead of behind it. "The Larkspur file died this morning," she said. "You know that." "I do now." She turned her computer monitor around. On it was the recorded notice, the county stamp, my name in 2 places, as owner of record and as plaintiff. 22 years I've done this," Paula said. "I've watched a lot of women in this department catch things underwriters missed and get told they were being difficult." She let that sit. "You had every reason to touch that file. You didn't touch that file. You went outside and did it right, and you did it while he was living in your house." She turned the monitor back. "Take Thursday. Take Friday, too." I said thank you. I went back to my desk. And at 12:15, I ate a sandwich in my car in a parking garage and let myself cry for exactly the length of one phone call I didn't make. He came to the house that evening at 7, which is the hour he used to leave. I didn't shout. That's the thing about men like Derek. The fight only ever runs one direction, and once you take the audience away, there's nothing behind it. He stood on the porch by the red door my father painted the summer I turned 9, and he said the sentence he'd been building all day in the car. "They're going to charge me. You get that? Your daughter's father is going to be charged." "Yes," I said. And then Grace came down the hall in her socks. She was carrying 3 boxes. She'd stacked them smallest on top, the way she stacks everything. A macaroni frame and Christmas paper labeled "Datey" in backwards letters. A Father's Day mug still taped. A Valentine's card in an envelope gone soft at the corners from being handled. She had gotten them down off the shelf she could reach. Derek said, "Hey, monkey," and started to crouch. Grace stopped about 4 feet from him and held the boxes out at arm's length, and she did not cry, and she did not smile, and her voice was so ordinary that it took the legs out from under both of us. "These are yours. I made them for you. You don't have to open them if you're busy." She set them down on the porch boards between his shoes and stood back up and put her hands behind her back. "I broke my piggy bank to help you, and my mom says you have to fix things yourself, so I hope you fix it. Good night." Then she turned around and walked up the stairs, and we listened to her feet on every single step. He knelt down on my father's porch with 3 wrapped presents in front of him and did not touch one of them. His phone rang at 7:20. I heard it from the doorway, and so did he. He looked at the screen for a long moment before he answered, and I watched a man say, "Yes, sir," 4 times to a detective from the Economic Crimes Unit who wanted to schedule him for 9 the next morning and wanted to know whether he'd be bringing counsel. Rick had withdrawn. He was not bringing counsel. I picked up the 3 boxes because they were hers before they were his, and I put them back on the shelf she could reach, and by then his taillights were gone. On the hook by my back door, there was a house key I hadn't put there. A young woman had handed it to a tow operator on a Monday afternoon, and he'd mailed it to me in a padded envelope, because that is the kind of small decency the world still has in it if you're patient. 7 months later, on the first warm Saturday in March, my daughter and I repainted the front door. Derek pleaded guilty in February to 2 felony counts, forgery and identity fraud, and was sentenced to 24 months with restitution ordered in an amount that will follow him for the rest of his working life. The Ohio Department of Insurance revoked his license permanently. You can read the order online, which I have done exactly once. The brushed metal letters came off the glass front suite in October. The bank resolved the credit line as fraud and released the lien. My father's roof is clean, and it is only my name on it, and it always was. Cassidy Van moved to Dayton before the 60 days ran out. She works front desk at a dental practice And there is a support order with Derek's name on it that will attach to whatever he earns whenever he earns it. She texted me once in November. I never asked whose house it was. I never asked anything. I didn't answer. I'm not built to be her friend. But when the prosecutor asked whether I'd object to her being treated as a witness rather than a defendant, I said no, I would not object, and I meant it. Corinne fatally surrendered her commission and testified. Rick's grievance is still pending with the bar. Tori Van's $3,000 sat frozen in an escrow account until December, while lawyers argued about who had actually taken it from her. She signed a cooperation agreement, was not charged, and sent me a card, of all things. Dolores Andrews stayed in Unit 4C at the Waverly for 11 days after the 18th before she understood, finally, that the last answer to that woman's question on the phone was her own front door. She did not call. She wrote 4 pages on the good stationery about family and forgiveness and how she'd always considered me a daughter. I wrote back 1 paragraph. She could stay through the end of the year at fair rent, paid on time into an account my attorney set up. She never missed one. She moved into a senior apartment in Grove City in January, and at Grace's Christmas concert, she sat 2 rows behind us and said nothing at all, which was, I think, the closest thing to an apology she has ever produced. Leland Ross retired for real in December. He sent a note, "Best exemplars I ever received. Keep using that pen." At the final hearing, the judge read the property findings into the record. She did it in the same flat courthouse voice that Closer used in August. And it took 11 seconds, and it is the single best sound of my adult life. Title to the real property on Fernway Street stands in the name of Yolanda Andrews, and has stood in her name alone since it passed to her under her father's will in 2019. Grace, who has a new piggy bank now, a green one, a dinosaur, which she informs me is more mature, has decided what she wants to be. She told her class in January, she wants to be the person who reads the papers and tells everybody whose house it is. Her teacher wrote me a very confused email, and that first warm Saturday in March, with the door propped open and the smell of paint in the yard, Mrs. Kessler from across the street stopped on the sidewalk and asked if we were selling. Grace, 6 years old, up to her elbow in red, didn't even look up. "No," she said, "my mom built this house." She didn't build it. Her grandfather bought it and paid it off with 26 years of forklift shifts, and I have told her that story 100 times, and I'll tell it 100 more. But I know what she meant, and so does everyone who has ever held a family up with 2 hands while somebody else took the photograph. We finished the door before dark. Second coat, same red, my father's red. So that's the whole thing. If any of it sat wrong in your chest, I'd love to hear it. Tell me in the comments what you would have done differently, because I still lie awake some nights wondering whether I should have said something in March instead of counting until August. And if you're listening to this in a house where somebody keeps telling you not to worry about the paperwork, do me one favor this week. Look up your own address on your county auditor's website. It takes 4 minutes. It's free, it's public, and you deserve to know exactly what your name is holding up. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. If it moved you, hit subscribe so the next story finds you, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there.